Beginning with this week's Parsha of Teruma and continuing to the end of Chumash Shmos, with the exception of the story of the Egel in Parshas Kisisa. The subject matter is that of the construction of the Mishkan. And the Torah devotes a great deal of space and detail to that subject. So the Mefarshim philosophically view it that just as Shabbat is Kedushat HaMakom, Kedushat HaZman rather, that Shabbat is Kedushat HaZman, that time can be sanctified, so too the physical space can be sanctified. And that is the idea that, for instance, the Navi says, Umolo ha'oretz deos Hashem, kamayim layom mechasim. That there can be, at the end of days, the world will be filled with the Spirit of God, so the world itself will have a holiness to it. The planet itself has a holiness to it. And this is part of the idea that all of God's creatures have the ability to have holiness or a holy purpose in their existence. So the Mishkan is the sanctification of place, not only of place, but of objects, because the Mishkan was transitory. The Mishkan went from place to place. It was carried by the Jewish people throughout the desert. And then when they came to Eretz Israel, it also preceded, they carried it across the Yarden. And eventually they established it in Shiloh. Now, the Mishkan in Shiloh already had a permanent status. The fact that they built walls to it wasn't just curtains anymore. And the whole archaeological digs at Shiloh that exist today, some say they have found outlines of walls, etc., that more or less coincide with the size of the Mishkan. And the Mishkan was there for a long time. It was there for over 340 years. So it was no longer a transitory place. It was a permanent place. And we see in Tanakh that the Jewish people, there was no Yerushalayim as of yet. And the Jewish people were Ole L'Regel, Shalosh Shonim Yeroyes, Pnei Hashem Elokecha, Kol Schurchas, Pnei Hashem Elokecha, that was at Shiloh. And we read the Haftorah on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, that the schut of Elkanah and of Chana was that they went every year to Shiloh. And therefore, that's where the Mishkan was. Then what happened, now there's a difference between the Mishkan and the Aron. The Aron was naturally one of the artifacts, maybe the main artifact within the Mishkan. But for various reasons, the Jewish people took the Aron to war with them. Whether they did so, some Mefarshim say because the Nevi'im told them to do so, or some Mefarshim say because the Nevi'im told them not to do so. So you always have to know which Navi to ask. It's like knowing which Rav to ask. You got to find the right way to phrase the question. So the Aron went, and the Aron was captured by the Plishtim. We read that in the book of Shoftim. And the Plishtim brought the Aron into Beit Dagan, the house of their god, as a trophy. And then when the idol of Dagan kept on collapsing, so then they were very nervous about the Aron, so they returned it to the Jews. But what did the Jews do with it? And so Chazal tell us, and again it's based on what it says in the book of Shoftim, that the Aron moved from place to place. And that finally David HaMelech moved the Aron to Yerushalayim after he captured it. So what happened to the Mishkan? What happened to all the other artifacts? To the Mizbeach, especially the Mizbeach HaZohav, the golden altar, and the menorah, and the Shulchan. So there are various midrashim. It's not clear to us what happened. It's amazing that the story is not clear. We don't have a strong tradition regarding these things. So one opinion, the Medrash says, is that everything was swallowed up. Shiloh was swallowed up. Shiloh was destroyed by the Philistines, and so the artifacts were swallowed up and goodbye. Others say that the artifacts were captured and that somehow David was able to restore them to the Jewish people, and he brought them to Ir David. There's a third opinion, is that they disappeared completely. Either they were pillaged, taken away, etc. So it's such a cruel lesson. But here you have 4.5 parshas of the Torah devoted to the size of every artifact and how it should be built, and Kol Chacham Leiv, and everything that has disappeared. Not here anymore. Goodbye. So there was, and we'll see later, the Aron also disappears. So there's a very somber lesson in that, but the lesson also is encouraging that these things, as important and as holy as they are, were not necessary for the survival of the Jewish people. The Jewish people could not survive without the Torah and without Talmidei Chachomim and without the Kiyum HaMitzvahs and without Shabbat, but it could survive without the Mishkan. It could survive without all of those accoutrements and holy objects, etc. So the Tanakh already teaches us that David HaMelech wanted to build the Beis HaMikdash, and he gathered all of the necessary raw materials to build it. But the Navi came to him and he told him that, Lo ata, you're not going to build the Beis HaMikdash because you have been too much of a man of war. And even though the wars were justified and they saved the Jewish people, nevertheless the Beis HaMikdash is not built by generals.
Says something today.
Well, I didn't say anything. I never make any political statements. You know, I told you the story about the two ladies that always used to fight. And the Rav Erev Yom Kippur said, you can't fight anymore, you have to bless each other. So they were walking home Motzei Yom Kippur, And one turned to the other and said, Yente, you should be blessed, but you know what I mean. So David wanted to build it, and the Navi didn't allow him to build it. But Shlomo built it. And Shlomo built it, if you read in Malachim, he built it differently than the Mishkan. Different size, different dimensions, and he had even different artifacts in the bay. He had 10 menorahs, for instance, not just one. And so the Meforshim say that he built it up to Ruach HaKodesh. He had Shlomo was blessed with Ruach HaKodesh, and that is how he constructed it, and that is how it was built, and that was the first Beis HaMikdash. And the first Beis HaMikdash was built out of cedar wood. We read in the Haftorah, he sent 30,000 laborers to the Lebanon to chop down the cedar trees and to saw them into planks and into wood, and then it was used to construct the Beis HaMikdash.
Why were these Jewish laborers who built the Beis?
Yes, and he sent all Jewish laborers, and he sent 10,000 at a time. He had 30,000, he rotated them. The 10,000, if they worked for a month, they were home for 2 months, he rotated them. But he had Hiram, the king of Tzor, give him architects and builders, because the Phoenicians were tremendous builders at the time. And they were like his consultants. And they helped build, and he had the goldsmiths and everything else that was necessary to build the artifacts. So that Beis HaMikdash stood for 410 years, according to the Gemara. It's not clear to us how the cheshbon is, because it doesn't come out even with a lot of things that other cheshbonos. But anyway, the Gemara says it stood for 410 years. When it became clear that it was going to be destroyed, the Navi Yirmiyahu we read in last week's Haftorah, who already says that the Beis HaMikdash is going to be destroyed. And because of that, they took him and they put him in the pit and in the dungeon, because they didn't want to hear the news. So the Navi Yirmiyahu, according to Chazal, somehow took the Oron and the artifacts from the Bayis Rishon from Shlomo, and he buried them somewhere. Nignaz, we don't know where. And so though the original Oron and the original Luchas disappeared, and we never saw them again. Whether they will be rediscovered is also a difference of opinion in the Rishonim as to how the third Beis HaMikdash will somehow occur. But now the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and the Jews went into exile. And therefore, many Jews felt that there was no hope for them anymore, because they were so convinced that Kedushas HaMakom, that the Jews could not survive without Kedushas HaMakom, without the Beis HaMikdash. You lost the Luchos, you lost the Menorah, we're out, that's it, it's over. So we'll continue tomorrow, because there's a whole sojourn here of the Bayis Sheni, which can cast light on our current world as well. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Omer, Otsa Kodesh Baruch Hu L'Zakos Yisrael, Lefichach Yivu Lahem Torah Yisrael.